The gallows stood tall and unshakable, set against the grim backdrop of Auschwitz, the very place where over 1 million lives had been extinguished under one man's command. On April 16, 1947, justice came full circle. The man once in charge of this factory of death, Rudolf Hoess, was marched to the spot where he had overseen unspeakable horrors. He wasn't met with the silence of gas chambers this time, but with the cold, final snap of a noose. This wasn't a scene from fiction or a dramatized courtroom thriller. This was real, raw, harsh. For many, it was justice served. For others, it was a chilling reminder of the cost of cruelty on an industrial scale. If you are sensitive to brutal truths or graphic history, turn back now. This is not for the faint-hearted. Rudolf Franz Ferdinand Hoess was born in 1901 in Baden-Baden, Germany. Raised in a strict Catholic household, his early years were shaped by discipline and a deep sense of duty. He joined the German army during World War I at just 14, lying about his age to fight for the fatherland. After the war, he bounced through far-right paramilitary groups, eventually finding his ideological home in the Nazi Party. By 1934, Hoess had joined the SS and quickly climbed the ranks. Recognized for his organizational skills and unwavering obedience, in 1940, he was appointed as the first commandant of Auschwitz, the site that would become the deadliest extermination camp in history. Under Hoess's management, Auschwitz transformed from a detention center into a mechanized center of genocide. He oversaw the installation of gas chambers, the mass transportation of Jews, and the cold, calculated murder of over 1.1 million people, mostly Jews, but also Poles, Roma, Soviet POWs, and others. Hoess viewed his role with chilling detachment. He often claimed he was just following orders, an excuse echoed by many high-ranking Nazis, but his own writings revealed a man deeply committed to Nazi ideology. After the war, he went into hiding, posing as a farmer under a false name until British forces captured him in 1946. He was eventually handed over to the Polish authorities, who decided that his judgment would take place not in a distant courtroom, but at the gates of Auschwitz itself. Rudolf Hoess's trial was held in Warsaw before the Polish Supreme National Tribunal in early 1947. This wasn't a hurried proceeding driven by vengeance. It was a meticulous process grounded in justice. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Eyewitness testimonies, Nazi documents, and even Hoess's own detailed confessions. He did not deny his role in orchestrating mass murder. In fact, he admitted to personally overseeing the killing of approximately 1.1 million people. During the trial, Hoess came across as eerily calm and detached, explaining the logistics of genocide as if he were discussing factory management. He spoke about improving efficiency in gassing operations and the methods used to dispose of thousands of bodies. His clinical tone sent chills through the courtroom. The defense leaned on the familiar refrain of just following orders, but it held no weight. Hoess was not a minor cog. He was a key architect of Auschwitz. His efforts had made the camp a centerpiece of the final solution. On April 2, 1947, the tribunal sentenced Hoess to death by hanging. In a symbolic decision, the execution was to take place at Auschwitz, at the very site of his atrocities. It was a rare and powerful moment in post-war justice. Not only was the sentence carried out in the land of the victims, but also on the soil where his crimes were committed. Poland was clear. This man's end would be public, and it would be seen as a final act of reckoning. The execution of Rudolf Hoess was scheduled for the morning of April 16, 1947. Unlike most war criminals hanged in distant prisons, Hoess's punishment was set to unfold on the very grounds he once ruled with terror: Auschwitz. The gallows were erected just outside Crematorium Muef, a place that had seen the beginning of mass exterminations under his command. It was a calculated act of symbolism. The Polish authorities wanted the final scene of Hoess's life to unfold, where the screams of the murdered had once echoed. Survivors, camp staff, journalists, and a handful of officials gathered quietly, aware of the magnitude of the moment. Though often referred to as a public hanging, access was tightly controlled. There were no cheering crowds, just an eerie, dignified silence. Hoess was escorted to the gallows by Polish guards. He wore prison clothes and walked with a stiff, almost mechanical gait, gone with the power-hungry SS officer. In his place stood a pale, hollow man facing the weight of history. A priest had visited him the night before. In his final hours, Hoess reportedly expressed remorse and converted back to Catholicism. He even wrote a letter to his family and asked for forgiveness, though for many, his words came too late, drowned out by the screams of the dead. As he climbed the wooden steps, there was no fight, no last-minute outburst. When the noose was placed around his neck, the executioner pulled the lever, and Hoess dropped through the trapdoor. The execution was swift. Time of death, 10 a.m. Afterwards, his body was not granted burial in a marked grave. Instead, it was quietly cremated, its ashes scattered. The man who had overseen the most systematic genocide in history vanished into the same nothingness he had inflicted upon millions. Photographs of the gallows still exist, stark reminders of that cold morning. Today, visitors to Auschwitz can still see the site, marked simply and without ceremony. It remains a powerful symbol of justice, not vengeance, served in the very shadow of atrocity. Though often described as a public hanging, execution of Rudolf Hoess was not a spectacle for the masses. Unlike traditional public executions meant to warn or shame, this event was highly controlled. Only select individuals, officials, journalists, and a few camp personnel were permitted to witness it. Survivors and relatives of victims were not invited. The decision reflected a careful balance. Poland wanted the world to know justice had been served, but without turning the moment into a media circus. Hoess was not to be martyred or sensationalized. His end was meant to be solemn, a quiet but firm declaration that such evil would not go unanswered. Compared to other Nazi trials and executions, Hoess's was uniquely grounded in symbolism. Executing him at Auschwitz wasn't just justice. It was history writing its own closure in the ruins of a place built for death. The execution of Rudolf Hoess marked more than the end of one man's life. It represented a profound moment in the global pursuit of justice. By choosing Auschwitz as the location, Poland ensured that history would never forget who he was or what he had done. The place of his crimes became the stage of his reckoning, and that symbolism still resonates to this day. For Holocaust survivors, Hoess's death brought a sense of closure, not full justice, which could never truly be achieved, but at least accountability. Many recalled seeing him at the camp, distant yet omnipresent, orchestrating death from behind cold bureaucracy. Watching his execution, or even hearing of it, felt like a reclaiming of dignity stolen years earlier. The world watched, too. News of the hanging made headlines, and for many, it solidified the horrors of Auschwitz that had once seemed unfathomable. The photos of the gallows served as grim evidence of a reckoning few war criminals would face so directly. In the years that followed, Auschwitz became a museum and a symbol, not just of suffering, but of remembrance. The site of Hoess's execution remains marked, though not prominently. It doesn't glorify the moment. Instead, it underscores it with quiet finality. Hoess's hanging did not end the story of Auschwitz, but it did close a chapter. It reminded the world that even those who build engines of death cannot escape the hand of history or justice. Rudolf Hoess's death was not a celebration. It was a somber, symbolic act of justice. In the same place where he had engineered the murder of over 1 million souls, he met his end alone, surrounded not by the machinery of power, but by the silence of memory. The gallows at Auschwitz stand as a rare historical moment where justice and setting aligned perfectly. A man undone by the very institution he helped create. But the hanging did more than end a life. It forced the world to confront the scale and systemization of evil. It asked us to look into the eyes of a bureaucrat of death and see not a monster from legend, but a human being, capable of unthinkable cruelty through obedience, ideology, and detachment. So we're left with a chilling but necessary question. What does it take for an ordinary man to become the architect of a genocide? And who among us would speak out before it's too late?